Man, CrossPointe Church, we just want to say thank you for everyone that gave during Share this season. It was amazing to see how our church is a generous church and that cares about our community, other people in our church, and just the people of South Georgia. So can we just make some noise for Jesus one more time about Share this season? It's amazing to see what God has done through this faith family. We just want to say thank you. Christmas is an amazing time, and it's a time where we love to give, we love to do presents and those types of things, and it's also a time we love just looking at Jesus. That's what this whole day is about, is fixing our eyes on Jesus. But if we're all honest with ourselves, it's so easy for us to get distracted, to have our eyes taken off of Jesus and put on presents, or put it on trying to provide, or put it on your family or travel, or you could put anything in that blank. And so often Christmas isn't about Jesus, it's about something else. And honestly, when we really think about Christmas, I know as a parent, a lot of times you're thinking, you kind of count the cost of Christmas. All right? Every parent has done this. You look at your budget and you're counting the cost. Okay, what can we afford with our family? I know that's what my wife and we did. Okay, what can we afford with our family? What can we give our children at Christmas? We count the cost. My 3-year-old, she said she wants a pink Jeep and a pink cell phone. I think we're in trouble. I don't know. And so I was like, I don't know if we can afford that, but we're going to try. But we count the cost before we buy it. And as I was thinking about that, I remember last year when they opened their presents, they played with the bubble wrap more than they did the presents. And I was like, I don't even know if it's worth it. But we ask ourselves that question, is it worth it? And we look at that at Christmas, but we also do that with our own walk with Jesus. With our own faith, we ask ourselves that question all the time, whether we realize it or not. Is it worth it? Is it worth it to follow Jesus? Is it worth it to give a second offering when we're trying to also provide Christmas presents? Is it worth it to spend money on a mission trip instead of a vacation? Is it worth it to help a family in need instead of treating myself? Is it worth it to walk out in obedience instead of doing what I want to do? Is it worth it to follow Him instead of my own American dream? Last week, I was reading a story about an older woman named Helen Roseveare. She died a couple weeks ago at the age of 91. She grew up in England, and she went to college at Oxford, where she was studying to be a nurse. And it was there at Oxford that God just radically changed her life. He called her to himself. He changed her from the inside out. And then He gave her this burden for the nations. And so she actually got to go to Africa to be a missionary in Africa, and specifically in the Congo, where she was able to build hospitals, build schools, build churches, see people come to know Jesus. But in 1964, something crazy happened in the Congo. Civil war broke out. And she wasn't able to escape it. And so she actually became a prisoner. And in prison, she faced some of the worst torture, brutality you can imagine. And it was in that prison cell where she asked herself that question. Is it worth it? The hurt, the pain, the beatings, is it worth it? And one night she was crying out to God, God, is it worth it? I don't know if it is. And she says in a loving, still voice, she heard God saying, Helen, you have the question wrong. The question isn't, is it worth it? The question you need to ask yourself is, am I worthy? And it was in her jail cell that she fell on her face and wept because she realized that Jesus is worthy. And this is what she wrote. I want to read you one of the things she wrote while she was in prison. It says this. Helen said this, God never uses a person greatly until He has wounded him deeply. The privilege He offers you is greater than the price you have to pay. The privilege is greater than the price. And I love this, and I'm so challenged by this because the privilege is greater than the price because Jesus is worthy. That's why we celebrate Christmas. That's why we love this time, because Jesus came down, Emmanuel, God in flesh. He came down to rescue and to save. But the beauty of the manger means nothing without the brutality of the cross. Faith family, Jesus is worthy because he is God. He is our Savior. He is our rescuer. He is our Redeemer. He lived the life that we couldn't live. He died the death that we deserved. He satisfied the full wrath of God that was meant for us. And then in 3 days, he conquered sin, he conquered death, he conquered hell, and he conquered our enemy by rising from the grave. And he is now seated at the right hand of the Father, actively drawing men and women to himself, making us his sons and daughters. He is building his church. Yes, we can make some noise for that because nothing will stand against our King Jesus. Because he is worthy. Faith family, I want to press into that this morning. And we're going to look at a very familiar text that a lot of times we read at Christmas, and it's Matthew chapter 2. And so if it's your first time to CrossPointe, we want to say welcome. If you don't have God's word, we're going to have it on the screen. But we're going to be in Matthew chapter 2, looking at verses 1 through 12. This is a story of the Magi, or the wise men. So Matthew 2, 1 through 12, it says this. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born king of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They told him, in Bethlehem of Judea. For so is written by the prophet, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judea, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people, Israel. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship him. After listening to the king, they went on their way. And behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother. And they fell down and worshiped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. Faith family, I want to give you 3 truths for us this morning. When we truly see that Jesus is worth it, that he is worthy, 3 things are naturally going to happen in our lives. And the first one is this. Jesus is worthy, so we gather. Jesus is worthy, so we gather. That's what we see at the very beginning, that it was not a wise man. It wasn't just one dude. It was wise men. And the Bible doesn't tell us it's 3. I know that's what our nativity sets say. It was 3 guys because of 3 gifts. But most historians believe it was probably more than just 3 because when they got into Jerusalem, people freaked out. What I love about that, and it's so easy to miss, is that they traveled together. It says they came from the east. And most historians believe that was maybe Babylon in that area because of captivity. But if you look from there all the way to Jerusalem, it was about 800 miles. It took over 3 months to travel. And this isn't in car or plane. This is on camel or horseback, all right? And walking through desert, through mountains, through some of the most dangerous roads in the Middle East. They saw a star. And they got some guys together to go and worship the Messiah. And I can imagine on that road, because I know when I travel, if I travel more than like 2 hours, I get tired. Does anybody else get tired of driving more than 2 hours? All right, yeah, every parent in here is like, yes, of course, especially kids. And so I can't imagine traveling for 3 months. That sounds terrible. And I can imagine one of the guys was saying, hey, bro, we're like 20 days into this. We can still turn around and catch, go back home and be chill and just do what we like to do. I can imagine the other guys there saying, no, that's not what we're called to do. We're called to go worship the Messiah. Because there's a truth here, faith family, that commitment lasts longer in community. Commitment lasts longer in community. Over Thanksgiving, my wife and I were able to travel to Boston for a couple days. And there they have a bunch of monuments, and one of them is Bunker Hill. And it's this huge monument that just goes straight up. And so we're walking around it, we're taking pictures. It's a beautiful cold day. And then all of a sudden we found out that you can actually go inside of it and climb all the way to the top and see all of Boston in the harbor. And of course I look at her and I'm like, we're doing it. And the guy was like, it's 300 steps. I'm like, we're doing it. And so we start climbing the stairs. And the stairs are numbered. I think it's a cruel trick they play on you. We got to stair 26. And I look at my wife and I said, we made a bad mistake. I took off my jacket. I was starting to sweat. And so, all right, let's keep going. We keep on marching upstairs. We get to stair about 152. I'm done. I literally take a seat. I was like, I cannot walk anymore. My legs feel like Jell-O. I'm done. You're just going to have to call the park ranger. They're going to carry me out. I don't know what's going to happen. And so I'm sitting there. It looked like I was just in a battle, and I'm sitting there. And all of a sudden, I hear this noise coming from below me. I look down. There's this curly, white-headed woman coming up the stairs. Maybe 70. And she wasn't slowly coming up there. She was floating up the stairs. I looked at her. My jaw dropped. I'm like, how is this happening? Like, I'm dying, and she's sprinting up these stairs, making fun of us as she's going by. And I looked at my wife. I was like, oh, heck no. If she can do it, I can do it. Let's go. And so we picked up our stuff, and we kept on marching, and we got all the way to the top. I was so tired I didn't even care about looking out. I needed oxygen. But I look at that story, and I think about the wise men. Because if it wasn't for that woman that challenged me to keep on running, I probably would have given up. Because commitment lasts longer in community. CrossPointe Church, following Jesus is hard. You will go through tough times. You will go through some very dark days. And you need men and women, brothers and sisters in your life that say, keep on running. Keep on running. Don't give up. Keep on running. Why? Because Jesus is worth it. That's why at CrossPointe we love to gather on Sundays. That's why we love life group. That's why we love our D groups. That's why we love the different ministries of our church, because we come together, yes, to worship Jesus, but to encourage each other. Keep on going. Keep on going. Jesus is worthy, so we gather. The second truth I want you to see this morning is this: Jesus is worthy, so we give. Jesus is worthy, so we give. Look at verse 11. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshiped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. What I love about that is how it starts. They went in the house and they saw the child. Faith family, we will never see Jesus as worthy if we don't fix our eyes on him. We have to see him. And when we see him, we see how beautiful and majestic he really is. And we want to see him more and more and more. Just like Moses on the mountain when he said, God, I want to see your glory. And he says, I want to see it more and more and more. They saw him. And then something crazy happens. These are grown men. They are wealthy. They are men of power. And then all of a sudden they fall down on their face to worship a baby. Why? Because those men knew that Jesus, the Messiah, the Redeemer of the world, is worth it. And I love how they fell down and they gave of their hearts before they ever gave their gifts. They gave of their time. It took them months to go see Jesus. They gave of their talents. These men were wise. We know that from Scripture. They used their talents to worship Jesus. And lastly, we see they gave their treasures to Jesus. And my heartbeat for myself and everyone here this morning is that we would be people that give of our time, talents, and treasures because Jesus is worthy. And as I was thinking about this idea of giving to Jesus, like, he doesn't need it. He doesn't need it. He owns a cattle on 1,000 hills. Everything is his anyway. So why does he ask us to give? And as I was thinking about that, I came back to this one thought. Because he is worthy. When you go visit a king and you bring him a gift, you don't give the king that gift just because he needs some extra gold. No, you give it to him because he's worthy of that gift. It's the same thing with us. The reason we give of our time, talents, and treasure isn't because God is looking for a handout. No, he is worthy of not only our time, talent, and treasures, but our whole life. We ascribe to his glory when we give. And when we do that, we're allowing others to see how good and glorious our God is. Jesus is worthy, so we give. Last thing this morning. Jesus is worthy, so we go. Jesus is worthy, so we go. Look at verse 12. It says, and being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. One of my favorite parts about this story is that these men could have easily caved to what Herod wanted. And if you know anything about Herod, they probably should have caved. He was one of the most ruthless kings that ever ruled in Israel. He even killed his own sons because he was scared they would take over his throne. So these men could have lost their lives by not doing what Herod asked them to do. But instead of following man, they said, no, we're going to follow God. Instead of caving into the fears of man, we're going to fear God instead, and we're going to obey him rather than obey man. These men went. They saw a star. They knew the prophecy in Micah, and they went. And I love when they get into Jerusalem. Jerusalem starts freaking out, and the scribes and the priests all come together, and they basically tell Herod, hey, he's supposed to be born in Bethlehem. And the scary part about this story, the tragedy in this story, is that the people who should have seen Jesus coming didn't. The people that should have seen Jesus and been celebrating that the Messiah has finally come missed it. And then the tragedy gets even worse. These men come in and say, hey, the Messiah is here. Come with us and we'll see the Messiah. But then they were too lazy. They weren't even willing to travel from Jerusalem to Bethlehem to go see Jesus. And Faith Family, this convicted me so much this week. Because I'm no different than them sometimes. I know the true worth of Jesus. I know what he has done for me. I know what the wise men knew, that they traveled 800 miles to see him. I know that Jesus is worthy, but there's some days I wake up and I'm not even willing to go 5 feet to see Jesus in his word. This is so challenging for us because Jesus is worthy, and we're called to be people who go, we get on our knees, we worship Jesus every single day. He is so much greater than Facebook and social media. He's so much greater than a football game. Jesus is worthy. So we're people who go to him. We go to others to tell about him, and we go to the nations declaring what our God has done. my heartbeat for myself, for the kids in DPK, and for every person here at CrossPointe is that we would see Jesus. That this morning we'd fix our eyes on Jesus. We'd put all the distractions away when we fix our eyes on him and see that he truly is worthy. And when he is worthy, we're going to gather. When Jesus is worthy, we're going to give. And when Jesus is worthy, we're going to go.